was like a dream that had become fabulous reality. Here I am in America for the very first time in 1983 on a mission to get an interview with Patrick McGoohan about his groundbreaking television series, The Prisoner. A dream because the series had changed my life back in 1968 when it was first shown in Britain. A dream because you almost never get to meet your heroes. A dream because an infant Channel 4 television in London had commissioned a documentary about its making. A dream because I knew nothing about making television programs. With the help of a director, this would be my first. McGoohan had always declined to be interviewed about his masterwork, but for some reason he'd responded positively to a 2-page begging letter from me to consider talking about it. On camera. This is the story of what happened on that trip. Archives had been raided, unseen interviews excavated, memories long since repressed, some for good reason, have finally escaped. 35 years later, McGoohan's daughter Catherine has helped me to understand much of what I didn't realise back then. But like father, like daughter, it pays to be guarded when talking to people who want information.
I took my time to think about whether I should do this. Because as you know, he rarely gave interviews. But what I feel is what he couldn't say about himself, maybe I can say for him. So that's sort of where I'm at. And he deserves it.
I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered.
Santa Monica, California. McGoohan had agreed to meet us on neutral ground, the Huntley Hotel. I recognized the building immediately from the exterior elevator, a significant feature in John Borman's gangster movie, Point Blank. The film's baddie lived here in the penthouse suite. In reality, this was, and still is, a bar, McGoohan's chosen rendezvous point. Not so blank, not so neutral. I imagined him arriving at the Huntley's underground car park, determined, angry even, and with a list of demands written on a letter, ready to be slammed on our table. Suddenly, he was there. McGoohan did have demands. We must not interview certain people under any circumstances. We should definitely interview others. Demands that we couldn't guarantee. We failed our first audition, but McGoohan did put us on callback. And then he left. I already felt like a defeated number 2, trying to persuade McGoohan to tell us his version of the prisoner story, something that was very personal to him. I just didn't realise how personal. He wasn't going to simply cooperate with us. When had he ever done that?
Let's make a deal. You cooperate. Tell us what we want to know. This can be a very nice place. I will not make any deals with you. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
Was number 6 referring to his fictional life or to the real life of his creator? McGoohan's daughter Catherine thinks it's both.
When I revisited The Prisoner many years afterwards, I had missed a very important detail. And when I saw it in that opening episode, Arrival, I went, oh my God.
Time of my birth is missing.
His personal birth date.
4:31 a.m., 19th of March, 1928. I've nothing to say. Is that clear?
He was not playing a character. Oh, he was playing the character of number 6. But that's 100% personal.
In 1983, without the benefit of either the internet or YouTube, I wasn't to know that McGoohan had already spoken about The Prisoner on television in 1977. TV Ontario in Canada had successfully lured him into the studio along with a small audience of students studying The Prisoner at university level. Asking the questions, someone called Warner Troyer. Answering them, Angry Patrick.
We're run by the Pentagon. We're run by Madison Avenue. We're run by television. And as long as we accept those things and don't revolt, we'd have to go along with the stream. I think it's going on every day all around us. I had to sign in to get into this joint.
Mm-hmm.
Downstairs, yeah.
Made you angry too?
Slightly, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Pass keys, you know, let's go down to the basement and all this. That's prisonership as far as I'm concerned. And that makes me mad. And that makes me rebel. And that's what the prisoner was doing, was rebelling against that type of thing.
Our next rendezvous was at Santa Monica Pier to talk about how we might do our interview for British television. I thought McGoohan was just running us around town, trying to keep us off guard. Now I know the simple truth, thanks to Catherine.
This is a place that he often went to. He loved this view, he loved this area. He would walk along here and he would take in the sights, and he really enjoyed living here.
Was it the sand, the sea, or the sights on that day that calmed McGoohan's troubled mind? All I know was that he finally agreed to stop running and start talking, to give us what we wanted: information about the prisoner.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. And what a lovely day it is again.
It was a lovely morning that day, the big day, the day of the interview. This time we rendezvoused in Laurel Canyon. McGoohan arranged to meet us somewhere in these hills, exactly where I don't remember now. He had access to an empty house where we could shoot and not be disturbed. I knew that he didn't really want to do this, but for some reason he'd agreed. Looking back at the footage now, it's far more revealing than I remember.
How many tapes have you got? Lots of tapes, aren't there? So you can write in as much as you want.
Okay, I'm ready.
What, are you ready? Come on then. I'm the one that's scared. Well, come on then. Well, you're smiling a lot, that's all right.
Can I just cough?
You can't see me yet, can you? Just see if it's possible to relax, that's all. Well, I take a look, I walk over to my fireplace, I look down at the camera, and I have a look at you all, and I say, all set? All right. Shoot.
I started by asking him about Lord Grade.
Lord Grade? Lou Grade? He was Lou then, before he was, nice. Start again, sorry. It's too cute, don't like it. What's more, same way.
What a lovely day it is again.
It was a lovely morning that day, the big day, the day of the interview. This time we rendezvoused in Laurel Canyon. McGoohan arranged to meet us somewhere in these hills, exactly where I don't remember now. He had access to an empty house where we could shoot and not be disturbed. I knew that he didn't really want to do this, but for some reason he'd agreed. Looking back at the footage now, it's far more revealing than I remember.
How many tapes have you got? Lots of tapes, aren't there? So you can write in as much as you want.
Okay, I'm ready.
Well, are you ready? Come on then. I'm the one that's scared. Well, come on then. Well, you're smiling a lot, that's all right.
Can I just cough?
You can't see me yet, can you? Just see if it's possible to relax, that's all. Well, I take a look, I walk over from the fireplace, I look down, there's the camera, and I have a look at you all, and I say, all set? All right. Shoot.
I started by asking him about Lord Grade.
Lord Grade? Lou Grade? He was Lou then, before he was, nice. Start again. Sorry. It's too cute. Too cute. Don't like it. What's more, same way.
I didn't know what I could do to make the whole thing easier.
All right. Let's, shoot.
I asked again about Lou Grade, but again, he didn't like his answer.
Let's start again. Start again.
Okay, cut. Cut, Chuck.
Same way, right away, please. All right, there then.
How could you tell Patrick McGoohan to relax? He didn't do relaxed.
Shoot.
For a third time, Lord Grade.
Lord Grade. He was Blue Grade at that time, and I had been doing a number of TV plays, a whole string of them in the days when they were live. In other words, when it said in the studio, vision on, you were exposed to the millions or however many that were watching, and if you made a mistake, you didn't have the privilege of going back and picking it up and correcting it. So it was very exciting, good for the adrenaline. One of the plays that I did was a play called The Big Knife by Clifford Odets, in which I played an aging movie star. And Lou Grade saw it, and at the time they were looking for someone to be in a new series that they were preparing called Danger Man.
Every government has its Secret Service branch. America, it's CIA, France, Deuxième Bureau, England, MI5. A messy job? Well, that's when they usually call on me or someone like me. Oh, yes. My name is Drake. John Drake.
The first script I got had a sequence in it where I was lying on a bed, and there was a young lady lying beside me on the bed, and there was a piece in the plot where I had to get at a very pertinent document, which there was a picture behind the bed, and behind the picture was a safe with a combination, and in the script it said that I rolled over on top of the girl and said, excuse me, in order to work the picture across, get at the combination, and find the document. Then read the secrets contained therein. So I mentioned that this didn't seem to be a particularly good idea. It'd be better without, and in fact, excuse me.
MI5. A messy job? Well, that's when they usually call on me or someone like me. Oh, yes. My name is Drake. John Drake.
The first script I got had a sequence in it where I was lying on a bed, and there was a young lady lying beside me on the bed, and there was a piece in the plot where I had to get at a very pertinent document, which there was a picture behind the bed, and behind the picture was a safe with a combination, and in the script it said that I rolled over on top of the girl and said, excuse me, in order to work the picture across, get at the combination, and find the document. Then read the secrets contained therein. So I mentioned that this didn't seem to be a particularly good idea. It'd be better without, and in fact, we didn't do that, nor did we ever do anything like that again.
If that particular scene was never shot, many others involving women spies and characters were. McGoohan was in at the birth of what was later termed the kiss-kiss, bang-bang genre, the age of the handsome, callous secret agent. but he obviously had a very different moral compass.
During this time, Bond came along, and he had been offered that role, and he had turned it down for the same reasons that he didn't like the character in John Drake. He felt that it was a very stereotypic Bond-like character that was womanizer, carried a gun, and shot people. He didn't want to play someone that was full of himself. I can tell you that. He was good looking, but it wasn't just his looks. You knew that he was always thinking, and you could always see in a scene, he was always working things out. He also moved very, very well. In fact, Lou Gray described it that he moved like a panther. He was firm and decisive. Other people have described it as he was defiant in every way.
He can make even the act of putting on his dressing gown appear as a gesture of defiance.
I thought that it was proper to do things which were not offensive on the television at that time. Now, of course, they have everything. The sky's the limit. But at that time, I thought if they wanted to go out and see something salacious, they could go to a movie theater that provided that sort of fare, come home and watch whatever good, clean stuff was going on at the time at home, you know? That was the general idea anyway, you know. There's a lot of stuff has been talked about, the fact that I'm a prude and I don't believe in sex and violence and all this sort of nonsense. So anyone who says that should go and see a movie called The Gypsy and the Gentleman, when I threshed around in the hay with Melina McCurry for a considerable amount of time. And another one, I can't remember the name of it, it was awful, where I had to rape a young Canadian gal. But that wasn't for the telly, as they say.
Don't leave me, Jess. I try to give you everything.
By now, the interview was going well. Patrick was relaxing, and so was I.
Just repeat that question to me while they're fixing it.
But the local crew were constantly having technical problems that I didn't understand. Nor did Patrick.
Cut.
I started to feel that we were letting him down, that this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was slipping through our inept fingers. That's when McGoohan took control.
How would you feel about a little stretch of the legs? Would you be kind enough to follow me in here?
He was now directing us, as he literally started to call the shots.
Shall we stretch our legs? Follow me. They're all ready.
He was creating his own sequence, moving the cameraman and us from room to room to room.
This is all too muddy. Let's start over. Not use this at all. We'll do another lot. Still rolling? Keep rolling. You still rolling? Let's go. No, let's go.
Finally, we were getting to the target. The prisoner was in our sights.
I felt like doing something else and looked for something else to do. And I had, of course, something at the back of my mind. And that's why we're here, isn't it? The general theme of The Prisoner has been with me for years, since I was a little boy, been brought up in a very strict religious household, going to school, strict schoolmasters.
Society. Yes, sir. Society is a place where people exist together. Yes, sir.
The individual little boy, any little boy up against this sort of the pressure.
You must conform. Yes, sir. It is my sworn duty to see that you do conform. Yes, sir.
And the slight isolation in it, and that's what the theme of The Prisoner is, the individual in revolt against the bureaucracy. It's always been with me, and I suppose in some respect that sort of rebellion is in everyone, isn't it, in one way or another. It came to fruition. I'd done lots of writing on that theme, nothing to do with The Prisoner, but I got the idea of crystallizing it. On the first 2 weeks of vacation we did on the 39 half hours of Danger Man. We're in North Wales, and we had to shoot a sequence at a place called Portmeirion. And I remember I was driving an Aston Martin car down this little street into this village, the like of which I'd never seen, certainly in the British Isles. It was like driving into sunny Italy. Sequence, I found out that the place had been designed by a gentleman by the name of Clough Williams Ellis. I got together with him, talked about it, and he told me it was his dream, basically designed after Portofino. And I wandered around, and there were pieces of all sorts of sculpture from all over the world, anything, Chinese, Greek, you name it, it was there. And I thought how strange it hadn't been used as a setting for a film or something of that nature.
Swimming or sailing or sitting and sunning, if you dream of lazy days and lazy ways of having fun, if you long for the romance and charm of old Italy, go to Wales. That's it, go to Wales, to North Wales to be exact, to Merionethshire, where Portmeirion nestles beside Traumatic Bay as though it were the Mediterranean. A man's dream transformed it into this warm Mediterranean village that so surprises the eye, prepared for snowy peaks and lush green valleys. A man's dream transformed the coastline that is now Portmeirion. Slowly, it became a piece of Italy. Slowly, the dream became fabulous reality.
It could be the miles of beach and the ocean. It could be an island. It could be a village anywhere in the world, isolated. And I began cooking on my original little isolation theme set within that place. And of course I talked to people about it, particularly David Tomlin, who was the first assistant director on all those Danger Man episodes, and it developed and it developed and it developed until such time as some scribbling was done, and Danger Man finished, and what happened next?
Perfection here combines with practicality. Here is an hotel and a town hall and garages and shops. You imagine togaed Romans strolling beneath these classical colonnades. You imagine yourself an ocean away from Wales. But then Portmeirion is famed for firing imaginations. Literary imaginations in particular have thrived here.
When my father saw Portmeirion, he went, oh, okay. You had this place that could have been anywhere in the world that was surreal, that was another world, that was a neverland. I know for my mother, it's a place she can go to for a couple of days, and then, for some reason, there's a sense of uneasiness. That he knew how to use that. And I'm sure he felt the same the first time he was there. You just want to get out.
What happened to the scribbles was that I went to see Lou Grade and said, all right, shall we sort of say, enough danger, man.
He said, come on, Pat, let's keep going, you know, we're doing well here, everybody loves you, you know, let's keep making it. And he said, no, I'm done.
He asked me, would I do anything else? And I said, well, you know, I do happen to have a little idea in my mind and a few little notes on it, and took my briefcase, opened it, and took out quite a huge wad of stuff, you know, sort of this thick. In here, Lou, we've got an outline for a story, thing, a setting, here, and descriptions of things. I think he became somewhat alarmed when he saw all these pages going by, and said, no, he said, Pat, why don't you just tell me about it for a while?
So Lou Grade was not very good at reading material. He kind of wanted to be told and shown. And so my father gave him the premise. Okay, what if, not necessarily John Drake, but a character like John Drake wants to retire? What happens if he's not allowed?
He listened until I'd finished. I sat down. Then he got up, puffed on his cigar, marched around a little bit. And then he turned on me and he says, Pat, you see, you know, it's so crazy that my work. When can we start?
McGoohan's concept for The Prisoner wasn't an easy fit for television, even in the confident, experimental atmosphere of late 60s Britain. Just how inconvenient his initial concept was is something he had revealed in his Canadian interview in 1977.
You didn't initially want to do 17 films?
No, 7 as a serial as opposed to a series. I thought that the concept of the thing would sustain for only 7. But then Lou Grade wanted to make his sale. He wanted 26, and I couldn't conceive of 26 stories because it would be spreading it very thin. But we did manage over a weekend with my writers to cook up 10 more outlines, and eventually we did 17, but it should be 7. At the time, what was selling very well was Danger Man, for instance, action-adventure stuff. But the thing about Lou Grade was that he was not limited in his thinking. He had a broad concept of life, and he was willing. I said, of course, there'll be a little action-adventure in The Prisoner, too. Most of it in the mind, but there'll be some. And but then he said, he just said go. You see, he has an instinct. He has a feeling for something. He lives on instinct.
I think Lou liked the danger, and he liked taking a gamble too. I mean, he was a businessman, but he liked taking a gamble, and he totally took a gamble on The Prisoner.
From the very moment that he said go and shook my hand, we never had a contract. He never interfered in anything that I did, never bothered me.
Whatever difficulties both Patrick and we were experiencing in trying to film an interview about the prisoner, and despite even bigger difficulties that were waiting for us just around the corner, he did something very kind. He called Lou, now Lord Grade in London, about doing an interview for us. I like to think that he told Lou to do it, rather than asked. That's the Patrick McGoohan we all loved.
Somebody once asked me, how do you get on with Pat McGoohan? I said, very easily. I have no problems with him at all. Well, how do you do it? I said, I just give in to it. I left it entirely in his hands. I was absolutely contented. I knew that he had the project in mind. I loved the concept of it. I loved the locale. And most important, I thought Pat McGoohan was a star in whatever he appeared. I thought he had a remarkable talent. He was an outstanding personality. He was the best leading man we had in the country at that time.
There was certainly an intensity about him. He never compromised himself. And that, I think, is the way he led his life. A lot of the times. I think he put in a lot of pressure on himself sometimes, and the people around him. I think sometimes when you've got these ideas and these thoughts and you know things, it's sometimes hard to live in the world when you see what's going on. And I think in that respect, there was a sense of isolation. At periods of time, I'm not saying all the way through.
Good morning again.
Can't we go tighter on it? And then we just exclude that. Let's go tighter on it. We'll be here all night. Okay, check a frame on this, please, Mike, so that you exclude all that. We just don't have it. We got it? Because we cut back to the other shot anyway. So let's do it. This next time.
By now, it was dark outside.
Hope so.
It was dark inside too. But Patrick persevered, with the film crew obviously not up to the job in hand. In fact, he seemed to become increasingly determined to have his say. Next question. You wrote and directed several episodes of The Prisoner, sometimes under made-up names. Did your role as executive producer on the series enable you to keep better control of it?
The control and the overall look of the thing had nothing to do with the title of executive producer. Since I'd cooked up the idea, I guess that they referred back to me if they wanted to know what was going to happen next, what was the intention of it all, what was the direction of it all, what did it mean, and all that sort of stuff. So the titles had nothing to do with it. I didn't sort of ask for the executive producer role at all. It was sort of pushed upon me because the lad sort of said, well, you better put your name up there as something. I didn't have it up there as the creator. They said, you better stick it up there, something to do with the other side of production, as opposed to just acting in it and doing the odd bit of directing and writing.
When The Prisoner started, they had this concept. It was a concept show. And it was very clearly thought out. None of this was an accident. And I think my father had written something like a 40-page outline of everything. Wardrobe, sets, the phones, the blazers. But imagine being the director or a writer coming on to a show like that and understanding immediately what everyone's going for. So it was important to my father to keep the concept intact and to not veer off. And the last thing that he wanted was to have just another secret agent show. So in a way, he had to be involved in every aspect of it because it was in his mind.
The look of it, yes. Going back to the beginning of the concept of the man, in isolation against the establishment, against the bureaucracy, the best place to put him is in an area of isolation, whether an island or a remote village somewhere in the world. Then it was best to get down to basics and say, this village, what is this village like? Well, we knew what it was like architecturally because we were using Port Merion. Then we sort of decided to sort of think about what was the plumbing like? Did it have a newspaper? If it had a newspaper, what was the newspaper called? Electricity, television, what communication system? Transport, all that. We worked it out as if researching how one would build a city.
In the real world, Port Merion was a holiday resort. So when location shooting on The Prisoner began in September 1966, the streets were still full of tourists. One of them shot the filming of the first episode Arrival at close range, capturing exactly what was being shot by the production.
Where to, sir? Où désirez-vous aller?
Take me to the nearest town.
Oh, we're only the local service.
Take me as far as you can. Why don't you speak to me in French?
French is international.
I suppose it's a waste of time asking the name of this place.
As a matter of fact, I thought you might be Polish, perhaps a Czech.
What would Poles or Czechs be doing here?
It's very cosmopolitan. You never know who you meet next. You see you?
Quite honestly, it's almost as if there is no prisoner without Port Merion, and vice versa. They would have come up with something, and they would have had to have probably built something from scratch. I don't know if they would have gone to a location. Clough, the architect, he had only just finished building it. It was actually maybe still in the process of being completed when they started filming. But I can honestly say to you, I believe it was built for The Prisoner.
Careful, sir, they're new plants. Sorry. Goodbye.
With regard to the penny farthing, brought images to my mind of a very elegant period. If you remember those old etchings, the penny farthing and the gentleman, beautifully dressed, seated atop the big one of the two, the penny, wearing a top hat, mustached, all this sort of thing, and fine patent leather shoes on those wheels. And it was an era of elegance. And the penny farthing was used to symbolize progress, which was an ironic comment, I hope, on the fact that progress perhaps goes too fast for us sometimes and we're not able to catch up with it.
It had been a long, nerve-jangling day. Finally, Patrick led us to the empty, cavernous living room of this mysterious house. It felt like an abandoned film set, where he could play his final scene in slow retreat and at a safe distance. But why had all this been so difficult for him, and for us?
He was embarrassed to talk about it and to take credit for everything.
I'm the one that's scared.
And again, it goes back to not wanting to talk too much about himself.
Just see it as possible to relax, that's all.
And not explaining too much about the meaning of this or that. He felt the work spoke for itself, and it was left for individual interpretation.
Any more explaining to do? Come on.
He didn't care for actors talking about themselves. He thought it was very indulgent. And he also didn't believe that actors should give away their secrets.
I didn't know that then. I do now.
I'll have to ask Chris. Why was that?
By the time it came to talking about the prisoner's infamous final episode Fallout, McGoohan was in full sarcastic mode. He was enjoying teasing us, testing us, tormenting us.
Religious? What was religious in the last episode? Religious? Big one. Purgatory was in it? Where was that? What? That it? Really? Well, it's nice talking to you. Sure there's nothing else? Is there anything any more explaining to do? Come on. I can't think of anything else either. If the chance you have understood anything at all about this, oh yes, indeed, if the chance you have understood, they're pointing at me, those chaps up there, anything at all about this, it will profoundly disappoint me, because I've done my best to confuse you. But, you know, we'll keep trying, won't we? Seeing you.
It was over. To reward ourselves for surviving, we drove into the Mojave Desert the very next day. Along the highway, relaxing resorts with names like 1,000 Hot Springs and Desert Hot Springs. Our mistake is that we never once looked back. Our little road trip ended right here in this remote desert hotel. We were in this very room when the phone rang. It was McGoohan. He was already here, waiting for us someplace nearby. I'll never know how he found us. But I do remember his last words. We met. He changed his mind. He took out his checkbook and signed a blank check. How much did we want to hand all the footage back? We couldn't. We needed the interview or we had no film. At last, we reached a compromise. We agreed to do the entire interview all over again. That's why the material filmed in that mysterious empty house in Laurel Canyon has never been seen before. I should have reminded myself that this was the same Patrick McGoohan who had wowed theatre audiences in 1959 with a blistering performance in Ibsen's play Brand. Brand, an uncompromising priest, a man with such high moral standards that few people lived up to his expectations, a man made lonely by his own all-or-nothing philosophy. That was the McGoohan Brand.
Sometimes a role comes along and you have the writing, you have the character, and you have the actor. And it just fits perfectly. And it's almost as if the material was written for you. And I think in this case, that was true. I was lucky enough to see it. I can hear him right now, actually. I can still hear his voice.
Jesus, give me light.
And I still remember him striding across the stage, calling out to God, trying to get an answer.
Unrepentant as she had lived. Stop this constantly pointing. If I weaken now, I am damned tenfold. Henceforth, I shall fight unflinchingly for the victory of the spirit over the weakness of the flesh. The Lord has armed me with the blade of his word. Now I stand firm in my will. Now I dare. Now I can. Crush mountains!
Put your affairs in order and leave this place.
If the earth were to tremble, I should still remain.
It was just so powerful. Peter Sallis was in it with him, and he said that when he was on stage with my father and he looked him in the eye, he realized that he may never see a performance like this again. The fact that he was so volatile, and he was driven, he was direct, he had a purpose, the undeniable purpose, and passion. And I think all those elements were very much in number 6.
If you insist on living a dream, you may be taken for mad.
I like my dream.
Then you are mad. This is your world. I am your world.
Our last rendezvous, Patrick's Roadhouse on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. I assumed that this was another piece of McGoohan mischief. This was his place, his life, and his stories. We talked again about how this day should go. Inside, I noticed the joke menu. 2 choices, take it or leave it. Obviously that was going to be the special of the day. We followed Patrick up into the Hollywood Hills, high above the smog that squatted on the city that was now his home. This is where he wanted to relax and speak, this time about the team that helped him to realize his dream.
Where am I? In the village.
David Tomlin, we'd become great friends on The Danger Man. I think he was first assistant director on that. And then I needed him closer to me when we started doing The Prisoner. So he, in fact, produced it and co-supervised the scripts with George Markstein, who was brought in as script supervisor.
Who are you?
Then, of course, there was Bernard Williams, who was our production manager, and extraordinary young man. Has gone on to much bigger and better things, I hope. He worked for Stanley Kubrick for a long time. Our art director, Jack Champagne, again, family. A man that you couldn't stop working. Whatever time you got to the studio, if you got there at 6 o'clock, you thought you were early, he'd been there half an hour before, hunting around trying to find little pieces to fit into this set or the other set to make them full of the character that he did so well.
In 1983, I was lucky enough to interview Jack Champagne at Pinewood Studios, along with Patrick's most valued collaborator, David Tomlin. 2 men central to the conception and realization of The Prisoner. Men Patrick had referred to affectionately as the lads.
You and Pat had already got a sort of a visual feeling about the place, not in detail, of what the set should be to suit the...
Well, it was influenced very heavily by Port Marion itself, wasn't it? So,
yes, but Port Marion, as you know, is Mediterranean architecture, whereas when we came indoors, it was all way out futuristic, almost going back to the days of Fritz Lang, you know, in the M, you know, sort of everything was very stylized and symbolic.
Where can I make a call?
Well, there's a phone box around the corner.
Thank you.
exchange is this?
Number, please.
I want to make a call to...
You could call Luke. What is your number, sir?
I haven't got a number.
No number, no call.
I had never written before, and Patrick came in one day and said, I've seen Lou, we've got the money, we've got the series. I said, oh great. I said, what series is that? He said, well, you know what we've talked about all these years and so on and so forth. So he said, write the first story. So I said, well, I've never written before. He said, well, we better start writing. So I got hold of George Markstein and dragged him in a room, and we sat in there for some long time and came up with a rival. I gave it to Patrick, who read it, got very excited by it. And then he began to add touches. He began to stylise it, and it took on a really quite a different look, you know. And he was going sort of over there, and I was trying to keep it over here. Between the two forces, it ended up as it ended up, really. You know. And then my uncle here put his fingers in the pie, and that's how it all
made the thing look visual.
Being the man he is, and being the person that I try to be, we put everything into it. All our time. In fact, we work 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and try to make every episode really 1000%. I think it took me personally 6 months to recover before I felt human, and probably took Patrick longer, but Jack never had that problem because he's a very resilient young man.
He was conscious of not to make himself feel like he was doing, you know, it was a one-man show. He did not want that. He loved it. He loved the process. He loved these people. It was the best feeling in the world, and I know he couldn't wait to get in and go to work. He loved being on the set. He loved the team around him. He loved when it was good, when it was really good, and you feel like all your juices are going. He loved that. I think it was hard when it stopped, actually. Yeah.
A main architect of the series was script editor George Markstein, who not only had a serious falling out with McGoohan over its drift away from espionage and into psychology, but would later claim that the idea for The Prisoner was his. But today, McGoohan was in generous mode. Almost.
George brought writers with a particular bent of mind. They weren't danger man writers, none of them were. They needed this sort of stylistic, futuristic thing, and he knew a number of them and brought them in, and I'm grateful to him for that. First, they weren't sort of, they didn't jump straight into The Prisoner mold and say, well, George has talked to us, we're going to write a script. A danger man script, fine, but a prisoner script, a little different. So George had a technique which worked extremely well. He used to take them out to the best restaurants in London, wine and dine them, and I don't know what he did. Maybe he force-fed them into a prisoner concept, but whatever it was, it worked.
What I think was maybe difficult was that these directors and writers coming in from a couple of other shows on television at the time, and they think, oh, we're going to do a spy, this is a spy show, we heard what the premise is, it's a secret agent who wants to retire. And each episode is going to revolve around that. So that was the premise, the simple premise. But then what happened after that, it was like a tree, the branches. It then stimulated all sorts of possibilities. And then what happened, the series became something else.
Maybe we could even talk about that something else, now that this was a very different Patrick. He seemed to have relaxed. Having received a brutal crash course from him on how to interview, this was also a very different me.
Well, of course, I always loved fairy tale. I imagine most of us do. We like our fantasy, our myths, our legends, and our belief that the impossible is possible, that anything can happen within the mind. It had something of a fairy tale about it. More than that, to be absolutely specific, it was an allegory. An allegory, I think, is defined as a story in which things, people, places, happenings conceal a reason or a symbolism. One might say, was it too outrageous to have a Western story and a cowboy movie in the middle of it? But I don't think so at all, because after all, we introduced into it the hardboard cutouts of various characters, and they came back from their little meander into the six guns and the spurs of the cowboy story back to their numbers in the village.
Interesting that he could separate fact from fantasy so quickly.
So fantasy, certainly, fairy tales, yes. Allegory, always.
Why do you care?
And I think it was particularly crystallized in what is my favorite episode, which is Once Upon a Time, fairy tale time. And because a little of that was autobiographical, so I suppose I got that out of my system. Whatever you call that, there's a name for it, I suppose, but I got it out.
You will take 6 of the best.
I'm not guilty, sir.
10, 12. 12, sir. So that I can remember.
Once Upon a Time was also my favourite episode. An edible battle between McGoohan's number 6 and Leo McKern's number 2. A physical and mental struggle for supremacy all the way from the cradle to the grave.
The set was called the Embryo Room for obvious reasons. And it was this head-on clash between two people. It was do or die. Leo's rhythms are so terrific, you can throw out something quite unexpected inflection, and he will immediately pick it up and come back with the new one of his own.
Jackie, shut up. And you must.
And then you build upon that.
Must. Jackie, must.
And it becomes a sort of rhythmical duet.
Must. Jackie, must. Mother, must. Father.
You knew that it was going to be hammer and tongs. I mean, we were dear friends, but we couldn't be dear friends in the midst of the show.
Patrick had demanded that I should look him straight in the eye. So now I did. I asked him about poor Leo McGoohan.
Leo on Once Upon a Time, this is what you're trying to get out of me, isn't it? Leo, on Once Upon a Time, the pressure was, he'd just come from a very demanding role in the theatre. And he was very tired when he came on it. And he had a sort of, the pressure was so much on him that he really couldn't work for a couple of days.
In some circles, you might call that a nervous collapse or breakdown. Something McGoohan had been less evasive about in his 1977 Canadian interview.
Leo, one lunchtime, went up to his dressing room, and I went to see the rushes, and I knew he was tired. I went up to the dressing room to tell him how good I thought he'd been in the rushes, and he was curled up in the fetus position on his couch there, and he says, go away, he says, I don't want to see you again. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I've just ordered 2 doctors, he said. And they're coming over as soon as he said, go away. He'd gone. He cracked, which was very interesting. It was terrific pressure.
I know you. You're smart. In my mind, you're smart. Why did you resign?
This may be the only surviving material evidence of what had happened off-screen. A photo of McGoohan signed by Patrick with love and some of those all too familiar numbers. Patrick's script for Once Upon a Time was full of them. How did he go about writing for the series?
The writing of the script, well, any of the scripts that I wrote for that, I write very fast. It churns around up here for a long time. Then I just have to, when I attack it, I have to go through, beat myself through to, and all of the 3 scripts that I wrote for The Prisoner, each one was done in about 36 hours. Once Upon a Time, I think I wrote straight down. I don't think I changed a word of that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Our property man, when he looked at it, he said, what idiot wrote this, you see, because there were 4 pages with nothing on it. There was Leo and there was me. We used to write the character of me, P, Astral Prisoner. Leo P, and for all these pages, all they were saying was
6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 1, 6, 1, 6, 5,
6, 6, 6 of 1, 1 of 6, 6 over 1 into 6.
6 of 1, half dozen the other.
6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6 of 1 and a 1 and a dozen and 6, 6, 6. I don't blame the property master for saying Mickey O'Toole, who was a wicked Irishman with a great sense of humour, said this rubbish here, whoever, because I didn't have my own name in it. The name I had on it when I sent it down onto the set, because I knew I would be ridiculed, was Once Upon a Time by Archibald Schwartz. So Mickey says, this Archibald Schwartz, where did you find this guy? He says, trust, he's a good lad, Mickey. I said, trust me, he'll turn out to be all right.
2, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 2, 4, 6. That's me.
Only Pat could have written those particular scripts. And I think they're very good. Sad to say. Yeah, he's quite a good writer, is Pat. I wish I could act like he could write.
Television writer Lewis Griefer knew McGoohan well and contributed a script to the series. When I interviewed him in 1983, it seemed he knew about McGoohan's increasing obsession with those numbers.
Well, first of all, towards the end, it was totally dominated by Pat. Directing, writing, producing, his whole concept. I mean, that is a rare phenomenon because most television series are teamwork. By now, Pat was the team. He was taking the thing very seriously, frankly. He was too seriously, as far as I was concerned. And this number 1 and number 2 business was really bugging him. I had a personal relationship with Pat, and he used to come around here occasionally and say, you are number 2. You know, and my wife, I think, was also number something or other. Number 6. Why is number 6 a likeable character? Because he is fighting. He's not accepting the situation meekly. He's not a docile person. He's a man that says something is going on. And I like to know what it is. Pat is very much his own person. That's his characteristic. Pat doesn't want to be lovable. Pat's got no intention of having people love him.
But the Patrick now sitting with us on that hill above LA was lovable, generous and surprisingly honest. Time to ask him about number 1.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean by that. Who was going to be number 1? All right, well, I'll level with you on that. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that. The first person that discovered that was after I dragged myself out of the office, and it was complete after its 36 hours childbirth thing, you know, a lot of labor. We had the script run off very quickly, again, another thing, so I got a copy of this thing, and before I caught up a couple of hours sleep before working on Monday morning, I sat with David, we were having some tea or something, someplace, some tea room or something. I said, "You better read this," and gave it to him. And I just sat at another table and sipped tea until he'd finished. Then he gave it back to me. And he said, "I thought it might be you in the end." There's nowhere else to go. Who could it be? You know, I wasn't going to ring up Sean or Roger or any of these fellas. I mean, you know, who could it be? I don't know who it could be.
Back in February 1968, this is the moment I'd waited 17 weeks for, along with 17 million.
In that direction, he really was getting very paranoid towards the end.
We thought you would feel happier as yourself.
The inevitability of his thinking was the schizophrenic answer, you know. Number 1 and number 6 are going to be the same, because that was the pressure that the series was going toward. Again, it was nobody wrote down things on the piece of paper. I think it was Pat actually moving in that direction correctly. And by that time, towards the end of the series, I mean, it was Pat's series totally. I mean, he had his own concept. And yes, I wasn't surprised, because as a matter of fact, quite a long way from that, I thought to myself, when are we going to get number 1 is me? Hello?
What is the most evil thing on earth? Is it jealousy? Is it hate? Is it revenge? Is it the bomb? What is it? When one really searches, it's under one thing. It's the evil part of oneself. The most evil thing that I could put in there, behind those masks, first of all the black and white mask, then the mask of the ape, and behind that, the grinning evil face, I hope, of myself, just for a split second, and then you see it once more, just for a split second, and I can't blame audiences saying, "I wonder what's happening, what's going on." If that was a cheat, then the whole thing's a cheat, because he could have got out. I'd be very, very angry and disappointed if they hadn't watched. If they hadn't jammed the switchboards at ATV, I would have been outraged. I would have slunk around for years with my tail between my legs, instead of which it was just terrific. Loved it. And if I can do that again, I'll do it again. God love them. Watch it. Millions of them. And be outraged. As long as people feel something. That's the great thing, is when they're walking around not thinking and not feeling. That's tough. That's where all the dangerous stuff is, because when you get a mob like that, you can turn them into the sort of gang that Hitler had. We don't want that. We want people who say, "Hey, now wait a minute, you dare do that to me? I'm going to call Lord Great about that."
Well, it wasn't very popular. And the switchboard at the network just went crazy. And but in our household, I just think that my father, he felt like a little self-conscious, and probably that he shouldn't go walking down the street for like a couple of days. People were expecting an answer, and they were expecting a conclusion, and they were expecting to see a face for number 1. Well, that was never going to happen. Never going to happen. And I have to say that I thought he was brave and courageous, because he went for it. And he went for an ending that has longevity.
I wanted to have controversy, argument, fights, discussions, people in anger, waving fists in my face, saying, "How dare you? Why don't you do more secret agents so we can understand?" I was delighted with that reaction. I think it's a very good one. Conventional end of the evil person personified as the number 1 that we'd never seen, this mystery character that brooded over everything. What was he going to be like? What is he? Was he a Jekyll? Another Jekyll Hyde. Now, I think they expected more a sort of James Bond villain at the end. And I think they felt that they'd been robbed with what they got. A lot did. But I would argue against that. I don't think they were robbed, because going back to the allegory, which is what it was, so you have to have an allegorical ending. I mean, you can't have Sean Connery looking at himself at the end and say, "I'm going to kill you, mate." You know, you can't do that. It don't work for James Bond. There's not a lot of mystery in James Bond.
I always wanted to know what was going to happen with the balloon, but nobody could tell me.
Rover the Balloon died in Fallout. The series had come a long way since the filming of Arrival in Portmeirion 18 months before. We had come a long way too, today without any lights. Just enough time to ask Patrick about the prisoner's continuing popularity, even though by now he had become little more than a silhouette against the darkening LA skyline.
Incredibly long life. Well, you see, there was a thing that I always felt that it was sort of designed for 1984, and it's ironic in some ways that it's running in England again, the tail end of '83, and I believe into '84. You know, sort of 2000 and something. I don't know. Maybe there'll be one or two people who might want to see it then. But the thing one must never do, which is in some way, I'll say this, in some ways, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, talking to you and to the people who are going to view it and hear it, to explain the prisoner. Because in myself, I am still getting new interpretations. And I feel fortunate that in parts of it, I hit lucky.
Be seeing you.
Those ideas, I hope, you know, one can play with them forever. The sky's the limit. Isn't it? I think the sky is the limit. Be seeing you. I hope.
End of the day. End of our final interview. And the end of my trip. Patrick seemed pleased with this last performance. Or maybe he was just relieved that it was all over. For now. As a fan turned rookie interviewer, I was happy not to be returning to London empty-handed. But mostly, I was happy because I'd actually met number 6. Once upon a time. We later flew to Paris to show Patrick a cut of the documentary. He hated it so much that he yelled at us the entire day in various cafes across the city. When he went back to LA, he made his own documentary, sent it to us in London, and asked for that to be shown instead. The original of that film has been lost, maybe forever. What you're about to see are pieces of a poor pirated copy filmed off a television screen in Portmeirion.
How many insects find their home in an English country garden?
Patrick's riposte to our film was typically mischievous. He went to all the places we had been, Santa Monica Beach, the Huntley Hotel. He'd added music, Nana Muscuri singing English folk songs, and had his daughter Anne ask him the questions.
Be seeing you has all sorts of connotations. I mean, it can be a sort of be seeing a friend, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, be seeing you with expectation of pleasant times ahead. And it can be seeing you, a long journey, somebody going away. And it can be a threat, be seeing you. And all sorts of things. But mainly, the thing about it here, in the context of The Prisoner, was that it was be seeing you, meaning that there was this constant surveillance. That when you were asleep, when you were having your dreams, someone was picking your dreams in your sleep.
Early one morning.
many fights in The Prisoner? Oh, yes. We had a couple of humdingers. And I think it's always a good idea to have, if you're going to have a scrap, have a big one and get it out of the way so that everyone knows we're all in the same boat. Because that, if the fight goes the wrong way, verbal, of course, all verbal, then it's time for that person to say, well, I'm leaving by another boat. But if they're coming on your boat, there's certain things that have got to be observed.
Oh, don't deceive me, oh, never leave me. How could you use a poor maiden's soul?
Needless to say, Patrick's film didn't go out on Channel 4 on January the 16th, 1984. Ours did.
Now on 4, and only on 4, the answers to the questions you may have been asking since the beginning of The Prisoner.
Complete with obligatory 80s synth music and those primitive-looking video effects of the time, 6 into 1 The Prisoner file was almost as hard to watch then as it is now. So let's not.
Wipe it. Start again.
2017, and a rare opportunity to try and put things right. The chance to revisit familiar places, old interviews, and distant memories. The chance to make a new film. The film that Patrick McGoohan deserves. Unfortunately, there is no escape. Certainly not from the past. We've just seen that. But there's also no escaping your destiny. Not here. Not in the village. And so it begins all over again. There's no escaping the questions that you ask of yourself.
Did the prisoner escape?
No, the prisoner never escapes. I mean, you're a prisoner of something. Everyone is a prisoner of something. You escape when you're released, I suppose, by death. It's the final release, and as to how and where you go and what thereafter depends on what sort of prisoner you were. You could be a prisoner and free, at least on parole.
Yeah. It's still rattling around in the mind, isn't it?
But the concept? Of course, yes.